So for today's Key Stage 2 literacy lesson, you are going to need some paper, a pencil or a pen, and your imaginations as always. And what I want you to remember is that at any point throughout this video, you can pause to carry out the activity and then you can restart. Okay, let's go. So for today's lesson, we are going to be revising our understanding and use of metaphors and similes. And we will know that we've achieved this if we are able to explain and give examples of similes and metaphors, if we are able to improve sentences using similes and metaphors, and if we can choose a simile or a metaphor to create a setting. Okay. So to warm up, what I would like you to do in a moment is pause the video and see whether you were able to explain to somebody in your household what you understand a metaphor, a simile and figurative language to mean. Okay? And if you are struggling to recall them or you're not quite sure, see if you can work with that person to find examples online or maybe in a dictionary, and then we'll come back together. Okay, let's have a look. So a simile is a way of describing something by comparing it to something else using the words like or as in your sentence. For example, her eyes are like stars and her lips are like roses. So by comparing her eyes to stars, it makes us imagine that they are bright and that they sparkle, doesn't it? Just like stars do in the night sky. And by comparing her lips to roses, it makes us draw upon our understanding of what roses look like. Sometimes they're very vivid red or a bright pink. So again, it helps to create that picture that they're really vivid part of her facial features. Let's have a look at this one. The car was as fast as a cheetah. Okay, we know how fast cheetahs run, don't we? Some of the fastest land animals. So by comparing the car to the cheetah, we are saying that that car is the fastest car on the track. There is no other car that is faster. It's a good comparison to make. So what I would like you to have a go at now, remembering to use like or as, is see if you can finish the similes for these images. So we have, the doll's face was as smooth as. Grease was hot like. The book was as exciting as. The night was as black as. And the fireworks were colourful like. So pause the video now and see if you can complete those 5 sentences using the simile. Okay, let's have a look. I'm just going to take a couple. So for example, the doll's face was as smooth as silk. Silk is very smooth, isn't it? So I can imagine touching her face would be like running my hand over silk, very smooth. Grease was hot like an oven, because again, we know how hot temperatures get inside an oven, don't we? So by comparing the temperature in Greece to the heat of an oven, it really helps the reader to get an idea of how hot the temperature was that day. And the fireworks were colourful like a rainbow. Again, I know what a rainbow looks like after a storm, so do you, so does the reader. So by comparing the fireworks to the colours of a rainbow, we can imagine, can't we, as those fireworks are exploding in the night sky, the sorts of colours that we might see. I'm sure yours would even better. Okay, a metaphor. A metaphor is a way of describing an object or action by saying it is something else, even though they aren't actually the same. Now, my Year 4s, you might recognise this quote as being from a book that we studied together in the spring term, a narrative poem. Can you remember what it was? It was The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes, wasn't it? Let's read the sentence and see why it's a metaphor. So the moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. So Noyes, in this case, has said that the moon was a ghostly ship, a ghostly galleon. Can a moon actually be a ship? No. So why has he said the one is the other? Well, if we imagine a moon in the night sky, they're big, aren't they? Just like ships are big, ghostly, perhaps because they shine white in the sky. And also, if we think of something ghostly, it creates that sense of fear, doesn't it? Which suggests that something terrible might be about to happen on this night. Tossed upon cloudy seas, well, that makes me think maybe it's a very windy night, the clouds are moving quickly across the sky. So again, it evokes all of these images, doesn't it, in our minds as the reader. We know that a ship can't be a ghost, nor a moon a ship, but using this metaphor forms the eerie image that Alfred Noyes wanted to create for the reader, as if the moon is being tossed about in the night sky. It's a lovely metaphor, that one. Okay, so now I want you to try and find the metaphors. Jake skidded to a halt on his bike, sending clouds of dust into the air. The sun was afire in the sky on this late summer's afternoon, and he took out his water bottle, drinking greedily as he gazed at the view. The fields were blankets of flowers. Jake sat on a nearby rock. His legs ached from all of the cycling he had done that day, and he gently rubbed his knees to loosen them up, ready for the long ride home. Suddenly he heard it. Someone, somewhere, was singing. Her lovely voice was music to his ears. Okay, so pause the video now, grab your pencil, and see whether you can write down any metaphors that you have found in those two paragraphs. Okay, let's read it again and then we'll see if we can identify them together. Jake skidded to a halt on his bike, sending clouds of dust into the air. The sun was afire in the sky. Did you get that one? Well done. On this late summer's afternoon, and he took out his water bottle, drinking greedily as he gazed at the view. The fields were blankets of flowers. Did you get that metaphor? What a lovely image that is. Imagine looking out over a field and just seeing it covered like a blanket in flowers. Jake sat on a nearby rock. His legs ached from all of the cycling he had done that day, and he gently rubbed his knees to loosen them up, ready for the long ride home. Suddenly he heard it. Someone somewhere was singing. Her lovely voice was music to his ears. And there's the final metaphor. Okay, so her voice isn't actually music, but it suggests to us how much he is enjoying hearing the singing that he can hear. Did you get all three? I'm sure you did. Okay. So why do we use similes and metaphors? Why do you think? Okay, so we use them when we're describing something to try and create a picture in the reader's mind. Similes and metaphors can help us to do this, can't they? They help to draw those comparisons. They are most often used in stories and in poems. And you might be reading a story at the moment where you can recall reading a simile or a metaphor. Now, here is Professor Plum. This is a really interesting picture we have here. Professor Plum is a scientist and he's sitting in his laboratory with all of his tinctures and his bottles and his potions, staring intently at this one particular test tube here with this red bubbling liquid inside. We might come back to this picture in a moment. So here is a challenge for you. I want you to see whether you can write a couple of sentences using either a metaphor or a simile or both to describe this scene. Remember, you can go back to the bigger picture. Have a look. You might just use a metaphor or a simile to describe Professor Plum's appearance. You might use it to describe what you can hear in the laboratory if you're standing there. So pause the video now and have a go at writing a couple down. Okay, here are my suggestions. Professor Plum's eyes were telescopes as he peered at the bubbling mixture. Is that a metaphor or a simile? That's right, it's a metaphor, isn't it? Because his eyes aren't literally telescopes, but by saying his eyes were telescopes as he peered at the bubbling mixture, that gives the reader a sense of how hard and how closely he is looking at what's going on inside. The clear liquid whistled in the jar like a passing train. It was music to his ears. Metaphor? Simile? It's both, isn't there? So the clear liquid whistled in the jar like a passing train. If you've ever stood on the platform as a train has gone past, and you've heard that whistle, that gives you an idea of what it must have sounded like inside his laboratory. And it was music to his ears. Again, we know that that suggests that he really likes the sound that's coming out there, doesn't it? It's obviously something is going very right. Okay, so now we are going to read 3 paragraphs which go on to explain a bit more about what's going on in this picture. Professor Plum had been locked away in his laboratory for days now, barely even stopping to eat or drink. His mouth was a desert and his stomach spoke to him angrily, but he ignored their pleas. He rested his left arm on the dusty pile of books scattered across his desk, and with his right hand he gently flicked the conical flask in front of him. The red and orange liquid inside coughed and spluttered as heat from the Bunsen burner excited it from below. Professor Plum wiped his weary eyes. Only the excitement of finally finishing the potion kept him awake. Just a few more hours, then it would be ready. I wonder what the "it" is that he's trying to create here. Okay, so here is your challenge for today's lesson. I would like you to see whether you could write the next couple of paragraphs of this story. Okay, and here are some questions to help you with that. What I want you to try and remember is to use some similes or metaphors to add to that character description and to that description of the setting. So, for example, what potion is Professor Plum making? Has he locked himself away? And if so, why? Why has he done that? Why hasn't he had any sleep? What might the vessels and books on his table contain? What sounds or smells might be experienced inside that room? And where might the stairway behind him lead? Now, if you are struggling to write a couple of paragraphs, just have a go at writing a couple of sentences that can describe the setting or Professor Plum, again using some metaphors or similes. But ideally, I want you to try and have a go at writing the next few paragraphs. You might even decide you want to go on and try and write the next chapter if you get really carried away with your writing. Remember, send your work in via Purple Mash or on email, because I would really love to read your stories. And you will know that you have been successful if you are able to choose some metaphors or similes to create a setting, if you are able to improve your sentences using those metaphors and similes, and if you've been able to explain and give examples of similes or metaphors to somebody in your house with you. Okay, good luck, and I'll see you soon.